time to pop some bubbles. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 15 of the Showerpodcast, the podcast where I'm in my shower and you do you. I'm your host, Chip, and today we're gonna talk about bubbles. Very fitting, given the scenario, and it wasn't meant as a joke. I mean, the idea is a bit more complex, but I like that it relates also to the bubbles in the logo. I don't know if it's time already, but it might help. So wherever you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, follow, do the notification bell, the thingy. Mostly because those things will be delivered to you whenever I publish them. And it's just, easier for you to consume them. And also it gives me, let's say, validation to keep on going. Most likely for now it's just people that already want to watch this, but it's good to get into the habit. So bubbles, what do I want to mean by that? I hope, because it's a very important topic, let's say nowadays, but I think you've all heard of social bubbles. And not only that, there is also, let's say, if social bubbles are the real version, we also have these social bubbles that live in social networks. And it always fascinated me because throughout my life overall, I think I've stayed. Actually, it's not true. I think that compared to other people, I've had the luxury, and I was lucky enough to visit and experience different bubbles, both from my, let's say, nationality background, my friends' background, my hobbies background. I have to say that until now I've done quite a bit of things. So I've always found myself living for a relatively short or long period, depending on how you look at it, but living in those bubbles. And by doing that, I was surprised of how so many topics that in one bubble were relevant, important, and were pretty much daily drivers. So there were things that people would discuss and care about every day. In others, they were not even known about. And this, I'm going to start it in a more, let's say, serious matter. Then maybe we'll also have it a bit more, let's say, we'll explain in more simple terms. But I recently was watching the podcast of Joe Rogan, where he was interviewing and hosting Zuckerberg. And 10 minutes into the video, it already got political. And I think that, I don't want to throw it too high, but for sure, more than 50% of all the content that is relates or is filmed or has to do with the US will end up speaking about politics. And this is something that to me is striking because within my life, there are very few occasions in which I do that. But this is my experience because in one of the bubbles that I've been, where I was working and meeting people that lived with politics, that worked with politics, that dealt with politics on a day-to-day basis, that was one of the main topics, if not the only, that of course then they derived and, let's say, become discussion for something that was happening in their country, something that was happening in their neighborhood, and something that was touching their ideology, and so on and so forth. And so it got me thinking, can you escape those bubbles? For example, for me, can I escape this bubble of politics? Can I live a life where I really don't care and not think about that? As of right now, I have to admit I'm not that involved, and I don't see myself necessarily getting too involved anytime soon. But that's just because in my bubbles and in, let's say, the things that I do and the people that I'm most often with, that is not a topic that we share. Maybe they do with other people that they know. I'm sure about that, and I've seen it. But with me, that is not something that binds us together. And for example, another, let's say, big example. This was, let's say, a bit more in the real life scenario. I also have one of the internet. I've always enjoyed being on the internet, and I've always, let's say, lived in one of the bubbles. Specifically, let's say in the last 2 to 3 years, I've gotten very close with one of my friends that, let's say, does Twitch for a living. And I've managed to also look a bit more into that bubble. So not just view it as a spectator, but also start to understand a bit more the dynamics of this environment. And also there, the paradigm changed completely. And you see that the things that people care about, the things that get people triggered, are so much different to what you would expect, or to what is the experience of somebody that doesn't live in that environment. And I think the key to all of this, and what gives us the chance to be able to get something out of them, because it is very easy once you know somebody, once you go to an event, once you do, even traveling, you are exposed to these bubbles. You are put within them, maybe not for your choice, but you are there. The moment you're not anymore, because the event finishes, you're out, or whatever can happen, then I think, are we able to think back and say, okay, what have I learned from this? What are the, let's say, the things that I've been surprised by and I can challenge myself with? Because at the end of the day, the bubble, what it does to you is that it, let's say, keeps closer and closer the people around you to your mentality, to the things that you agree with. And by nature, because that's what our brains do, you tend to accept whatever is close to that mindset, so whatever resembles the bubble you are comfortable in, and push back anything that, let's say, is contradicting or is not so close to your ideology and to what, let's say, your bubble believes in. Whereas if, while being in yours, because that is, let's say, inevitable, you cannot do anything about it. I mean, your bubble will always be there. But if you are able to just take one of the topics or one of the things that surprised you, okay? It doesn't have to be something that is common. It doesn't have to be something that necessarily somebody told you, but something that picked up your interest and that challenges your view and your bubble. Then I think you have, let's say, the key to be able to expand yours. And as I've said, let's say, go against that duality where I reject anything that I don't like and I accept just what, let's say, what's in my bubble. Because, and that's the sad part, you will end up just living in that, not looking outside, and just losing so many good things and so many opportunities just because you decided not to look, let's say, a bit further and pop your small bubble. This was episode 15 of the Shower Podcast. Thank you for listening or watching, and see you at the next one.